8:15. This meeting is reconvened in open session. I'll now turn this meeting over to Ms. Ellen Spaulding, Board's counsel, who will facilitate this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening. My name is Ellen Spaulding. I will serve tonight as the Board's attorney, and I will facilitate this hearing. I am not a decision maker this evening. Can I confirm a recording of this meeting is being made? Is that what the red light means? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. The following board members are present: Trustee Lewandowski, Trustee Salem, Trustee Dr. Pratt, Board President McLeod, Board Vice President McStravick, Trustee Shiel, and Trustee Unser. For a record, a quorum, in fact, all board members are present. Ms. Priscilla de la Fuente Corneal filed a complaint again under Board Policy FNG. Ms. de la Fuente Corneal's concern relates to the 2021 bond proposal, Proposition A. Ms. de la Fuente Corneal believes that this proposition stated there would be a new elementary school, number 13, and that by possibly not building that school, TISD is amending the bond without following Texas Education Code 45.1105. Given the nature of the complaint, the FNG process began at Level 2. Dr. Stephen Gutierrez, Chief Operations Officer, heard the Level 2 decision. Dr. Gutierrez granted in part and denied in part Ms. de la Fuente Corneal's complaint. The board has received a copy of the record, tabs 1, A through E, 2, A through C, and 3. These same documents have been provided to Ms. de la Fuente Corneal and the administration. Ms. de la Fuente Corneal is here tonight. Ms. Corneal, nice to meet you. Do you have anybody with you this evening?
Yes, my husband, Rainer.
Okay, would you like to introduce yourself for the record?
Hi, Rainer Corneal.
Nice to meet you too. The administration tonight is present with Ms. Holly Sherman, General Counsel for Tomball ISD. Ms. Sherman, do you have anyone with you tonight?
Yes, from administration, I have Dr. Martha Salazar-Zamora, Superintendent, Dr. Stephen Gutierrez, Chief Operating Officer, and I also have bond counsel present, Mr. Marcus Dietz.
Thank you. I will now ask each board member whether he or she is able to serve as an impartial member of this board in the consideration of Ms. de la Fuente Corneal's appeal. Any member not able to act in such a manner should say so and will be excused from participation in this appeal hearing. Go around the table again. Trustee Lewandowski.
Yes.
Trustee Salem.
Yes.
Trustee Dr. Pratt.
Yes.
Board President McLeod.
Yes.
Board Vice President McStravick.
Yes.
Trustee Shiel.
Yes.
Trustee Unser.
Yes.
The procedure tonight will be to allow both Ms. de la Fuente Corneal and the administration to make a brief presentation. This is not an evidentiary hearing, and there will be no cross-examination of witnesses. Ms. de la Fuente Corneal will present on her behalf, as I understand it, correct?
He's going to present for me.
Great, no problem. And Ms. Sherman will present on behalf of the administration, is that
Yes.
correct? Great. Ms. de la Fuente Corneal will make her presentation first, followed by the administration. Each side will have 15 minutes to make their presentation and then 5 minutes for rebuttal, closing argument. I will serve as the timekeeper. Are there any questions from either party?
Yes, we have a printout. I didn't know if you guys had them already or if we need to hand them out.
Is there any objection to the handout being handed out?
It's the same as what we emailed you guys, so, but.
Okay. Ms. Sherman, in the meantime, do you have any questions?
No questions. I would just note for the record that I have an objection if the materials contain anything outside of the record.
Great. Board members, as you know, the record began and ended at Level 2 in this matter, which means that for any information, may I have a copy also if you have an extra? Thank you. Any information that was not presented at the Level 2 hearing would be new information outside of the record of the grievance in this matter. Any other questions?
No.
Great. Mr. Corneal, you may proceed. You will have 15 minutes, and I will serve as your timekeeper.
Thanks. First, my name is Rainer Corneal. I'm a resident at Creekside and a father of 3 kids who all bike to school. I would like to start by stating that we value the quality of education that the district provides. We love our schools, teachers, staff, and community. I genuinely appreciate all you do for our kids. That being said, the issue at hand has been a personal attack on my value system and it needs to be properly addressed. I'll start with a brief background on what got us here. In early 2021, Tomball ISD presented a bond proposal to voters. Proposition A included 18 specific items, including a new elementary school at TIC. Proposition A was advertised and marketed to Tomball ISD residents on what schools, where they'd be located, and which communities they'd serve. On November 2021, the bond was approved, and Creekside residents made up 31% of total voters. If you fast forward to April 2023 special board meeting, when the district proposed an intermediate school at the TIC and to rezone all grade 5 and 6 Creekside kids there. A week later at a town hall, Dr. Z stated that the decision had already been made and no community input was required, so we promptly filed a grievance. As a side note, it's taken 6 months to get a level 3 audience with the board. I think it would have been even longer if I didn't start copying Mr. McLeod and the TEA complaints management on my emails to the district. Due to the public outcry, TISD board set up a public meeting in May to address the community's concern, during which it was obvious that the district had little interest in taking the community's issues seriously. However, Dr. Pratt and the board asked the district to perform additional due diligence. If TISD won't hold themselves accountable, I trust the board, TEA, Commissioner of Education, or court system will. There's been some confusion on what exactly was promised to Creekside residents, so I wanted to spend a minute on this, which is on slide 3. On the maps, I want to move from left to right. The first map is the bond marketing material, and this is what taxpayers voted on. The dark pink is a zoning area for the TIC elementary school and would provide relief to Creekside residents as promised. The second map is shown to reflect the proper rezoning of Timber Creek in dark green. The specific purpose of the bond remains static as the lime green area still houses TIC elementary school. Finally, the third map shows TISD's April 2023 proposal of changing the type of school and the community that it affects. A revote is required for changing the type of school. I'd argue a proper rezoning process should also be followed. Which brings me to the grievance. TISD is attempting to change the specific purpose of 2021 bonds. The type of school and the community impacts are both being amended. If TISD wants to change the purpose of the bond from an elementary school to an intermediate school, then a revote from the community is the appropriate path given the community is funding this project. A revote request is consistent with Texas Education Code section 45.110, which can be found in the appendix. On June 19th, we received the response to the level 2 appeal. Quoting the district's response, denied. Texas Education Code section 45.1105 is not applicable in this situation as it applies to unspent, unused bond proceeds when the specific purpose for which the bonds were authorized has changed. In this case, the purpose for which the bonds were authorized has not changed. Proposition A ballot language included the construction, acquisition, rehabilitation, renovation, expansion, improvement, and equipment of school buildings in the district. From my interpretation of the law, Texas Education Code section 45.003G allows purchase of school buildings to be submitted in a single ballot, which TISD did, notwithstanding Government Code 1251.052, which states a plain language description of the single specific purpose for which the debt obligations are to be authorized, which are the 18 specific items listed in Proposition A. However, from a practical standpoint, because the ballot language didn't list the 18 specific items listed that the $466 million would be used for, TISD believes they shouldn't be held accountable to deliver what they specifically promised and got the community to fund. Surely TISD didn't try to mislead voters by using broad ballot language as a potential legal loophole to avoid being held accountable to their commitments to the community. Which leads me to the bond language best practices. I believe TISD is aware of how ballot language can mislead voters. The president of the Fast Growth School Coalition is TISD's superintendent. One of their 2023 legislative priorities is, and I quote, to ensure all bond and tax rate election ballot language is clear, transparent, and understandable. Revise required language that misleads voters. TISD followed bond language best practice in the planning stage and needs to be held accountable in execution. How can it be legal to market a product to the community, get taxpayers to approve the plan, and then turn around and use the funds on a different scope that has negative utility to the voters who foot the bill? If TISD originally proposed to move Creekside residents out of Creekside, then the community would have voted the bond down. Over 1,300 signatures on the community's petition articulate this point. I want to provide a personal experience of organizations being held accountable by publicly marketed promises. Several years ago, my company entered into a contract with 2 other oil companies to share the cost of an expensive oil rig. The company operating the drilling rig then made public statements that they would use this rig for activities other than what the contract language stated. Plans changed, oil prices crashed, and cash got tight. The operating company tried to get the other parties to pay for the idle rig. The other parties brought the operator to arbitration due to the public statements made in their annual report. The arbitrator ruled that because operating company publicly stated they'd use the rig for other purposes, they couldn't hold the plaintiff liable to the original contract. It's not a perfect direct comparison, but my point is, there's precedent for courts to hold organizations accountable to public promises and not only what is stated on the ballot. For months, TISD has been pushing the idea of what you're doing is legal, if not ethical, because you're following ballot language. However, I've seen this play out in the real world, and it's not that simple. Outside of the legal aspects, the proposal for the intermediate school and rezone of our kids is a bad idea due to 3 main reasons, which have been shared with the board. 1, children's time, safety, and success. Number 2, the traffic and transportation concerns. And number 3, the negative impact to real estate values and TISD tax revenue in the Creekside community. It's disingenuous to hide behind, we promised relief to Creekside and that's what we're doing. The solution that we originally voted for, an elementary school servicing the community adjacent to Creekside, avoided all of these concerns. Again, if TISD won't hold themselves accountable, I trust the board, the TEA, Commissioner of Education, or the court systems will. Which brings me back to the FNG grievance request. If TISD thinks an intermediate school is the best path forward, then, per the Texas Education Code, let the community vote on the updated plan. I'm confident the community will support an intermediate school at CVGH site. An alternative solution to a revote is to offer a bilingual program at the TIC elementary school and allow open enrollment to Creekside residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sherman, you may now proceed on behalf of the administration. You also will have 15 minutes, and I will serve as your timekeeper.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President McLeod, members of the Board of Trustees, and Ms. Spalding. I'm here tonight representing District Administration to request that you uphold Dr. Gutierrez's Level 2 decision denying Ms. De La Fuente Cornel's request to hold a vote to consider using bond proceeds for a different purpose than that for which they were authorized, and granting her request for a public meeting to allow public participation since such a meeting occurred in May 2023. First, I'd like to note that this grievance was initiated by Ms. De La Fuente Cornel, which was based on the allegation and argument that the board is required to comply with Texas Education Code Section 451105 in order to construct an intermediate school rather than an elementary school at the Tomball Innovation Center using Bond 2021 funds. In her written grievance, Ms. De La Fuente Cornel requested as a remedy that a vote be held to consider the use of the bond proceeds for purposes other than the specific purpose for which the bonds were authorized. While it was not entirely clear from her written grievance, she specified in the Level 2 hearing that she requested a community vote, but at the least, a vote by the board. Now, Mr. Corneal has chosen to represent Ms. De La Fuente Corneal and has changed the basis of the argument in the original grievance. He is clearly now requesting a community vote rather than a vote by the Board of Trustees and bases his argument on a different section of the Texas Education Code, which is section 45-110. And he provides additional documentation which is outside of the original grievance. So again, I would like to object for the record to the extent that the Corneals have introduced new information at level 3. But let's go ahead and take a look at each of their arguments. Let's first look at Ms. Corneal's initial argument and the basis for her grievance. You can find the text of Texas Education Code section 45-1105 behind tab 1D in your binders. Section 45-1105 requires first, under subsection A, that unspent general obligation bond proceeds be used for the specific purposes for which the bonds were authorized. And how do we know the specific purposes for which the bonds were authorized? Well, for that we have to look at the statutes before this one, which we will get into further in a moment, and we will see that the specific purpose is determined by the language in the election order. You will find the election order for the 2021 bond election a few pages back under tab 1D also. On page 2 of the order, you see the language for Proposition A, which in relevant part is, shall the board be authorized to issue bonds in the amount of $466,640,000 school building bonds for the construction, acquisition, rehabilitation, renovation, expansion, improvement, and equipment of school buildings in the district. That exact language of Proposition A was also on the ballot for the bond election and is what voters considered. If you turn back several pages behind tab 1D, you will also see the same language that was included on the ballot. This is the language that all voters across the district considered, and it is the specific purposes for which the bond funds were authorized. The specific purpose for which the bond funds were authorized was the construction of new school buildings. And that is exactly the plan that has been proposed, to use 2021 bond funds from Proposition A for the construction of not just 1, but 4 new campuses in the district. So we don't even have to get to the rest of the statute. The rest of 45-1105 requires a board vote and a public meeting if bond funds are to be spent for a specific purpose other than the specific purpose for which they were authorized. Since that is not happening, no board vote is required or any other actions are required under section 45-1105. Now, let's look to Mr. Corneal's new basis for his argument in the applicability of section 45-110. You can also find the text of section 45-110 behind tab 1D in your binder. It should be the second page. Mr. Corneal's reliance on this statute is misplaced, as this section is wholly inapplicable to the situation. Section 45-110 applies to unissued bond funds when the purpose for which the bond funds were authorized has been abandoned or accomplished by other means. Here, the purpose for the bond funds has not been abandoned or accomplished by other means. Again, as we saw from the election order language, the purpose of the bonds was to construct new school buildings, and that is exactly what has been proposed and intended with the 2021 bond funds from Proposition A. The proposed plan is to construct a new campus at the Tomball Innovation Center and 3 new campuses at the West Complex. So the purpose of the bonds has not been abandoned or accomplished by other means. So that is where the analysis should stop. Section 45-110 is completely inapplicable to this situation. But since this is the basis of Mr. Corneal's argument, let's just take a look at the rest of the statute. If the purposes of the bonds have been abandoned or accomplished by other means, then section 45-110 allows, but does not require, the board to hold an election of all qualified voters in the district to use the proceeds for a different purpose that would be stated in a new election order. So essentially, this would operate like another bond election. A new election order would state the new purpose for the bonds and would be used in the ballot language which would match the order. An election would be held for all registered voters in the district, not just one pocket of voters in the district, not select neighborhoods in the district, not one community in the district, but all registered voters in the district. And because it would be an election of all registered voters, the district could anticipate that it would cost up to $70,000 to $100,000 to conduct such an election. That's a pretty high cost for an election with no legal basis and would definitely be a misuse of taxpayer funds. So, you cannot grant the Cornell's request for a community vote. There's no mechanism to hold an election for a portion of voters in the district, nor is there a mechanism to hold an election with no legal basis when the purpose of the bond funds already authorized by voters has not been abandoned or accomplished by other means. Section 45.110 is wholly inapplicable in this situation, and the specific purpose of the bond funds has not changed, prompting the requirement for a board vote under Section 45.1105. Thus, any request for a board vote or a district-wide election under this authority should be denied. And now I'd like to address some of the Cornell's other arguments, although none of those are arguments as to whether a vote of any kind is required by law. The Cornells make allegations that the district misled voters through bond election materials and not having more specific language on the ballot. Even today, Mr. Cornell has added information which he believes supports his argument about general ballot language. Specifically, he cites to Government Code Section 1251.052, applicable to bond elections of multiple public entities. However, what Mr. Cornell has missed is that Section 45.003G of the Texas Education Code, which, according to the plain language of the statute and the Texas Attorney General, controls over the language in Government Code 1251.052 for bond purpose descriptions. Section 45.003G provides a list of both general purpose projects and specific purpose projects for bond elections. General purpose projects include construction, acquisition, and equipment of school buildings, the purchase of new school buses, and the purchase of sites necessary for school buildings. Special purpose projects include construction, acquisition, and equipment of stadiums, natatoriums, recreational facilities, performing arts facilities, housing for teachers, and the acquisition of certain technology equipment. The statute allows that general purpose projects be included in one general purpose proposition on the ballot, and that special purpose projects be included in separate propositions. And if the general purpose language sounds familiar, it should, as the language from Proposition A in the Bond 2021 election tracks the language of the statute. This same language is used for general purpose bond propositions by school districts across the state. In fact, ballot language has to be submitted and approved by the Texas Attorney General before it can be included in an election order on a ballot. The language does have to be somewhat general, as allowed by the statute, because circumstances and needs of school districts change. Bond projects take years to complete, and a lot of things can happen in that time frame that results in needing to make changes to initial plans. Rising costs, inflation, changing needs, fluctuating student enrollment are just some of the circumstances that can alter initial plans. Some districts have even had to change plans from constructing new campuses to settling for renovations or expansions of existing campuses because of changing circumstances. The language in the election order allows for this, and definitely in this case allows for serving different grade levels at a newly constructed campus than initially planned. The Cornells also argue that the marketing materials are what defines the specific purpose of the bonds, but that is simply not the case as we've seen in the statutes. Marketing materials or any other information provided by the district prior to the bond election are not used to determine the specific purpose under these statutes. But let's consider for a moment what was in the information that the district administration made available prior to the 2021 bond election. You saw from Mr. Cornell's presentation that the materials included a proposed plan under Proposition A for construction of elementary school number 13 at the East Complex, or the Tomball Innovation Center. The purpose of the new elementary campus was to relieve overcrowding at the Creekside Elementary Schools. That was the information that was initially proposed and communicated to constituents prior to the 2021 bond election. And the only thing that was different from the marketing materials and the plan proposed by administration last April was the grade levels to be served at the new campus. This change in grade levels is a reconfiguration and not a rezoning or a boundary adjustment, prompting the district to go through the rezoning process. The administration did explore a boundary adjustment first, and that did not achieve the desired results and the relief needed in the Creekside elementary schools. Thus, the proposed plan that was the best option was a reconfiguration to remove grade 5 from the 3 Creekside elementary schools and grade 6 from Creekside Park Junior High. The proposed plan still consisted of construction of a new campus at the Innovation Center. The plan still proposed to relieve overcrowding at the Creekside elementary campuses. The only difference from the marketing materials and the proposed plan was the grade levels to be served at the new campus. Really, the Cornell's grievance boils down to their disagreement with the location of the proposed campus. You saw from Mr. Cornell's presentation that he provides reasons why some of the parents in the Creekside area disagree with their children being zoned to an intermediate campus outside of Creekside neighborhoods. And these reasons center around personal convenience, ranging from students not being able to walk or bike to school, to students having to ride a school bus, to increased traffic on roadways. But none of these reasons are relevant to the laws surrounding bond funds and whether the district has to take further actions pursuant to those laws. So, what are the Cornells still asking for? In her original complaint, Ms. De La Fuente Cornell asked for a vote and a public meeting for community members to address the board with their concerns about the proposed plan. Dr. Gutierrez granted Ms. De La Fuente Cornell's request in part because a public meeting did take place. The board held a special meeting on May 2nd, 2023, just to discuss the proposal to make the new campus an intermediate school. During the meeting, multiple members of the Creekside community voiced their concerns during public comment. Also, the administration presented information regarding the proposal to serve grades 5 and 6 at the Innovation Center campus. The board engaged in discussion and tasked the administration with exploration of all options surrounding the proposal. So that piece of Ms. De La Fuente Cornell's requested relief has already been granted. As for the request for a vote, whether a vote by the Board of Trustees or a new bond election for registered voters in the district, there is no legal basis for either in regard to the proposal of an intermediate school at the Tomball Innovation Center. Therefore, we ask that you uphold the Level 2 decision in its entirety and deny the requested relief except to the relief already granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman. Mr. Cornell, you may proceed with your closing statement. You will have 5 minutes.
Did you have anything to say? No, I mean, I'm just going to grant the time back. I'm hoping I can get a copy or visual or a recording of this so that I can soak in everything that was presented. I guess in my defense, we put in the grievance 2 days after TISD sent out an email saying they were going to move the school. I'm not a Texas education law expert. I'm not a lawyer. And so I spent the weekend trying to figure out if this could be done. So my apologies for switching the section from 45.1105 to 110 and what I presented to you guys, or what I emailed you guys earlier this week. I just hope you take our arguments into consideration and you understand where we're coming from and can empathize with why the community would think this way. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sherman, you have 5 minutes for your closing statement and rebuttal.
I'd just like to say that we appreciate the Cornell's professionalism in coming and presenting their arguments this evening. We definitely understand that change is hard for everyone and that we proposed something that would be a change, and that's been difficult. But when it comes down to the merits of the grievance and what is requested in the relief, there's no basis in the law for granting that, and so that's why we would ask that you uphold the Level 2 decision and deny the requested relief except to the relief already granted.
Thank you. The parties have completed their presentations. Do any of the board members have questions for the parties?
Is my light on?
Okay. Hi. I have a couple of questions for you. Thanks for presenting the context and the detail that you shared with us in the PowerPoint. Do you have any concerns about the intermediate school format? Indifferent of the location, do you have any concerns about the intermediate format? Okay.
No, I think a core tenet of ours was to keep our kids local.
Okay, got it. Would you have filed this grievance if an intermediate school was possible in your neighborhood?
No, I would not.
Okay. Okay. These aren't trick questions. I'm just trying
No.
to get a sense of. Yeah.
It's I don't go out looking to pick fights. I mean,
Yeah.
this is really personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. So, question to the administration. So, the bond language, and I don't know if this is for our bond counsel expert or not. Could you describe a little bit more for me on how loose or how prescriptive the bond language is, specific to what our voters ultimately went into the ballot and approved? So, how fluid or how much of that was the district writing that versus guidelines from, a higher governmental entity? Could you
Yeah,
describe
sure,
that for me?
sure. So there are no specific guidelines other than the statute itself. And so typically when I advise school districts on how to write that language, we write it with just the words from the statute. So that's what was done in this case as well, just so that we know that it fits within the law, the requirements of the law.
Okay. So explain a little bit for me on the statute. What were you referring to? Was it word for word? And who is the source for that statute?
So the source, honestly, I don't know. That's been there since I began practicing 20-something years ago.
Okay.
It was written by the legislature well before that, so that's been the language that's been used for, I'd venture to say, 50-plus years. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question?
So it kind of gets down to ultimately how much latitude did the district have? Because frankly, the layman's, it's not very lay people when you read it, right? So I'm just trying to get a sense of, is that the district writing that, or did we in the district have to refer or defer to the word for word in the statute?
They have to use those words if the district wanted to, and it's done occasionally. They can add additional words, so it would be something like including school X, Y, and Z. That wasn't done in this case, and it was not done, and I don't think I'm presenting testimony, but it was not done. When it is done, it's because they have specific projects that a school district wants to call out for voters to see.
Okay. One other question for the district. Have there been times in the history of Tomball ISD where bond dollars were used for maybe something that wasn't marketed as such because circumstances changed? Would Creekside, any of the campuses there, be an example of we retrofitted campuses, we've done renovations in other places that weren't necessarily? So I'm just trying to get a sense for precedent that the district might have.
So just some discussion here. I think originally when those Creekside campuses were constructed, they were originally through 6th grade. And so that's been some change in the district of how we've had to alter and change those plans based on data and what we're seeing in the district. I believe also with the construction of our Early Excellence Academy, that was in response to changes in the law requiring pre-K for all of our students. We don't have those facilities, and so we were able to utilize those funds to execute that district need.
Was the Early Excellence Academy something that was on the ballot?
No,
Was
no,
it
sir.
something that was marketed by the district for that bond?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
First question be for either one of y'all. Is there, so I'm assuming there's no, I haven't seen, heard anything about precedent from any other school district in Texas or anywhere else in the United States that might have a similar issue? Do y'all know of anything out there that would?
I'm just aware of other districts using bond funds for completely different projects. Like I mentioned, I know of a school district that used bond funds that they had proposed to construct a new campus and ended up adding on to an existing campus and not building a new campus at all. Things like that.
We're actually starting to see an increase of this happening more and more because the rising cost of construction and perhaps the bond went out prior to the unexpected increase. And so we're seeing a lot of changes currently based on, and that is why the bond language is written with the flexibility. I know it's difficult to understand, but there are reasons why it's written with the flexibility.
Well, I'm talking about this case scenario right here, is it?
Yes, there are
Anywhere-
many situations
Okay.
where schools have to build something different. We've given you some examples, most recently the Early Excellence Academy, but there are other districts that have the same challenges with demographics, and you begin a project with one thing in mind, and then with fluid and changes need to adjust for what is best for the district.
Okay, gotcha. One question for y'all. I know y'all been in your paperwork saying about the lower real estate value. I'm an appraiser by trade. So have y'all done an actual appraisal, or have somebody do an appraisal out in y'all's neighborhood to say this would be the effect, or you have any other precedent or any other to where I can look at something saying the school did this and it caused to where I can actually
Yeah, I
say
mean,
something.
there's
And
already.
not just speculation, 'cause
No,
not
that's-
speculation, but something I can actually read and comprehend.
That's fair. I mean, real estate agents are already asking the community about what's going on with the school because people don't want to move to the south side of the Woodlands and Creekside if this is going to be the outcome. So that's not, it's qualitative. On the other side of it, there's a lot of communities on the fringes of Creekside that attend Creekside schools, but they can't walk there. Their home values are 20% less than the same builder, the same home that is within the Creekside area where you have walking paths to the schools. Even though they have the same amenities, same schools, just they can't walk to school. And they sell it at like a 20% discount. And we did provide that to the board in May, an analysis on that. So I do think it hasn't happened yet, but I truly believe that it could be up to a 20% impact on property values.
Okay, so, but if you did do it, I didn't see it, or I may have missed it.
No, we
So
sent
who
you
act-
we sent you a lot of information.
So who actually did that analysis for you?
I did it actually. We pulled HAR values on every home and every neighborhood around the Creekside. Yeah, from the tax appraisals.
Okay, but you didn't get like an actual,
No.
like a fee appraiser to actually do, well, I mean, there's some circumstances, like you want to do a new apartment complex. You're going to do a feasibility study, say, hey, this is going to be for highest and best use. You're going to do a appraisal to say, hey, this is, or you could do like Waller County had a landfill property who was going to, and they had some documentation on that, or like for a right of way for like a new high-speed train or a new baseball stadium, where the value, they show the values can
Yeah.
go down.
Matt, if there, I'm happy to burden that cost and get you guys that information. If there's someone that I can reach out to, I'll.
Well, I was
I'll
hoping
pay-
you already did that work.
Yeah.
Since,
No, I did not.
Since you've been claiming it, I'm just,
It-
hopefully I can
Yeah.
have
I
it.
mean, personally, we will move if this is an outcome. I mean, I'll have to put my kids in private school for 2 years at $15,000 per kid. It's over 60 grand. It's just, yes, it's a personal inconvenience, but it just double sucks when we're the ones that voted and supported this bond, and now you're turning it around, and it's become a huge nuisance to our lives.
All right. Back to administration. Are there any kids going to early excellence who are in Creekside?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So at least one kid goes.
Several more than one, but yes, sir.
Okay, well, I'm just going to do the hypothetical, at least one kid,
Yes.
maybe 10 kids, whatever. Have they expressed any outrage or saying, why is the early excellence all the way over there, or they understand it is where it is, and
To my knowledge, we have not had one complaint written or phone call.
Or why can't we have early excellence at one of the elementary campuses?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question for you. So, in one of your comments, you mentioned that had you known that students would be pulled out of Creekside to go to another school, you would have not voted for the bond.
I mean, the bond would have been voted down is what I'm, if that was the marketed promise with the maps that were shown, then I do not, for the proposition.
Okay.
If everyone in Creekside knew they were going to have to leave Creekside for 2 grades,
Okay.
people would have been affected, everyone in Creekside would have been affected, so the bond would not have been approved.
Get the mic a little bit closer.
Oh.
when you-
Sorry.
So, no, that's okay. I just want to make sure I hear you. So the comment that you made, though, was a general statement that if children were taken out of Creekside, if people had known that on the front end, it would have, the bond would have failed. That's what your position
Yes,
was.
and the 1,300 signatures, I think.
Okay. And so I know during the level 2, you'd made a comment that there was a perception that the only students that would move to the new elementary school at the TIC would be those, I believe you said, south of Burroughs Park.
That was what was presented at Creekview Elementary when the district came to promote the bond.
But,
So-
but I mean, that was
Yes,
your
that's correct.
perception. That's what you
Yeah,
stated.
absolutely.
Okay.
They said,
So-
Creekside's going to be safe, and all those neighborhoods below Creekside will be moved to TIC, which will alleviate.
So,
the
okay, so here,
Creekside
this is
schools.
this is the question I'm going to, though. So if you have an overcrowding at, let's say Creekside Forest, and you have to move those students, and let's say, in order to reduce that, you would need to move those students to, say, Timber Creek. All right, well, now Timber Creek is gonna have an issue, so you'd have to move those students to Creekside. Okay, now Creekside's over full, so you gotta move those students to the new elementary. It can't just be south of Burroughs Park, because you've been moving the lines down in order to reduce enrollment at these other schools. So, as you stated, 30% of the 57, 60% of the Woodlands voted for having elementary school outside of Creekside and busing those students to the elementary. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is the statement that you made that if we knew that students would be bused out of Creekside, we would have voted it down. It doesn't, students were leaving Creekside. They had to. There's no way you can reduce enrollment at the other 3 elementaries.
Well, the neighborhoods below Burroughs Park don't belong to Creekside. They aren't
But
Creekside
that's,
residents.
to reduce the enrollment in the far east side, you've got to shift those kids to the west. And then those kids
The
who are
problem
in
is
the
it was a
west have
school
to
in the
leave
west that was oversaturated, which is our school. I don't think Creekside Forest is overpopulated. It was Creekview Elementary. And then the rezoning happened and Timber Creek moved over to, or Tiburon moved over to Timber Creek, and now Timber Creek is actually fuller than Creekview.
So I guess the question is, or I guess my issue is, my perception was there was going to be students that were moving out of Creekside, not south of Burroughs Park, but out of Creekside. And so I guess that's the difference in perception.
That was not what was presented.
So, yeah, on slide 3, we showed what the maps that were shown to the community. So those have the outlines of where these maps were. And then, to answer your other question, in April, in the April special board meeting, the way I understood it is if you kept the boundaries the way they were, Creek View got up to like 90%. So it wasn't overcrowded, but if you put the elementary school in, you would have enough room, given the boundaries that were presented originally, we just have a full school up in the creeks.
I've got a couple of questions. I empathize. I love walking my kids to school. Get it? Let's just play this out. A vote were to occur, voting down bond use for a school at the Innovation Center. What next? And that's an honest question. I'm racking my mind. I'm just trying to think, what's the next step? And I guess maybe ask both of you. What would be the next step?
Well, if you're taking the community's money and they don't agree with the plan, then I think the plan doesn't go forward. That's the ethical thing to do.
So just stay with the crowded campuses we have. Now, that's one way to interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, you proposed a solution, you got us to pay for it. If it has to change,
It should be something that benefits everyone, and it's not.
find the common ground. And I think there are lots of solutions that do that. I think Dr. Pratt really challenged the district back in May. I don't trust that the district is actually acting on those. I think they're just finding excuses of why they're going to keep an intermediate school at TIC. But work with the community. Find solutions that work for the people who are paying for this.
To the district. Yeah, is there an answer from the district on that? What would be next?
So I believe your question was if you held a new election.
Yeah, if the Cornels got as they wanted, right? If that were to all play out.
So the first thing you would have to do would be to find that the bond funds that the purpose had been accomplished by other means or had been abandoned. So we're going to abandon building a school. We're going to try to use these funds that have already been authorized by voters to build athletic multipurpose centers. Then you would have a different purpose that you would put in the election order. So you'd have to identify what the different purpose would be, because you're saying that the bond funds that were authorized for this purpose, these purposes have been abandoned or accomplished by other means. And I'm not aware that we've had a campus donated or we found some other means to get a new campus.
Okay. For the district, how many kids are we talking about in Creekside when we talk about going to the Innovation Center or wherever there might be an intermediate school?
How many students are we talking about? We'd be talking about anywhere from 800 to 1,000 students.
Okay. And I'm assuming this is not a bubble in the population of Creekside. Like, all the studies have been done that show there's not some large group of students passing through, requiring some new campus, and then those numbers diminish. Does that question make sense?
Yes, there is no bubble. This is true enrollment that we do not see decreasing or falling dramatically in the next 5 to 10 years.
Can I disagree with that? I mean, there are young families that move into Creekside. As those kids get older, people don't just, I mean, some people will move away, but I think a lot of home people just stay there. So I do think that the overcrowding will dissipate, and very quickly, because there's no more land to build houses in Creekside, as you guys know, because you can't find a spot for a school.
I have one quick question for both. You keep saying community.
Sorry?
You keep saying community, our community. So what's your definition of community?
All of Tomball. Like, the whole Tomball. It doesn't, like, are you talking about who would vote? I would say the whole constituents.
The community.
But
Is your community just Creekside, or is your community all of Tomball ISD?
So the community is all of Tomball ISD. This decision affects the community within Creekside. So, but if I wanted a revote, it would be for the whole of Tomball. And if the revote said, yes, the intermediate school at TIC is what the community wants, I would grudgingly go along with that.
So your argument is you think this is only affecting the students in the Creekside schools and not students in other schools in Tomball ISD? If this was to be made into an elementary or an intermediate school, you're saying that
No,
it's only going to be the Creekside students that are affected?
No, it'll affect other students, and I've emailed Lee on that as well. My selfish concern is with the people, with my community in Creekside. But yes, I said if you guys change, even if you move the intermediate school up to Creekside, well, then you have to worry about all those other kids that the elementary school would have served. And so yes, I'm not. I don't know how to.
Well, or if this, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, if
Sorry.
this ended up being an intermediate school at the TIC Center, it could still affect positive in Creekside and in other schools in the district as well for the overcrowding. I mean, it's not just Creekside schools that are overcrowded.
That's fair. I don't disagree that the district is trying to optimize locations for kids. I get that. But there's a right way to do it, and then there's a wrong way to do it, and I don't believe they're doing it the right way.
To the district, how do other districts announce campuses? How do other school districts go public with information about where their campuses are going to be built, what they're going to be building, irregardless of bond language, right? I'm curious.
So there are many ways in which districts choose to do this. Tomball perhaps had a certain practice, and with size, we continue to grow at a very fast pace as a fast growth school district, as was mentioned, the association that I'm a part of and lead. I think that we have looked very carefully at our surrounding neighbors that were already much larger or that grew as well, and how they have handled things. One of the conversations we've had, which I think is important for everybody to hear, including our parents represented here tonight, is that the district doesn't want to become this impersonal district where here decisions are being made and this is what is going to happen to you. The irony is that we have spent hours upon hours discussing how we handle growth, how we gracefully grow, how we grow as a community, the Tomball community. I am a resident of Creekside. I have only been a resident of Creekside for the entire time I've been superintendent, and even prior to that. But I am a Tomball ISD proud community member. And so it's important that the entire community, including my neighbors of Creekside, understand that as we grow, we want to ensure that everybody, to the extent that we can, be a part of it. We talked about districts that send out letters saying, this decision has been made, this is where your children will go to school, with no meetings, no pomp and circumstance, no any of those things. And so as we're growing, we want to still hold on to the fiber of who we are, the fabric of who we are, but yet also have to make some decisions that, unfortunately, what were some of the words used, may be of huge inconvenience to some people, to use other words, not mine.
And respectfully, I think that Tomball ISD didn't do that, because the way that was communicated to us was exactly what you're saying other school districts do, which was we got an email saying, guess what? The new elementary school is no longer going to exist, and now it's going to be an intermediate school, and everyone in Creekside is going to now have to leave their schools and go to the TIC. And that's how it was announced to us. And I think that's why everyone was also so upset in the beginning, because of the way it was communicated to us. There was no explanation of why this decision had been made that way. There was no conversations had with anyone. No public meeting was held before this email. It was just an email saying, guess what? Your kids are no longer going to go to Creekside. Now they're going to have to drive. Everyone in Creekside is going to have to drive to another school. So I think that was something that was really upsetting to us, the way it was communicated. which doesn't really change the fact of what happened, because in my opinion, the way it was, the school district came to our schools, to our home, to our neighborhood, promoted the bond, and then once the bond was approved, they said, well, we got you to vote on the bond based on these things that we told you. To us, it was kind of like they came to sell us something. And once we said, okay, yeah, I'll buy it, I like it, I like the idea of something that's going to fix overcrowding in my school, then the district just turned around and said, well, this is what we promised, but it's not what we're going to do. And I'm sure if they had gone to go tell everyone at West that they weren't going to build West campus, everyone there would have been disappointed as well, because I'm sure they sold that to them as well to get the bond approved. So that's how we felt like it wasn't very transparent. And I think if they want to change things, it had to have more community input before them making a decision on their own.
I guess I have a couple questions, even though I'm not sure all of the discussion so far, which is very good, how relevant it is to the hearing that we're having here. So a question to the administration. When the bond was put together and the marketing materials were made, was it the best intention, well-intentions of the district? That's what you thought the district needed, was the buildings that were listed there? That was what you thought at that time was needed, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So it was not designed to list certain buildings and then there was not a plan at that time to change it to something else later? Right?
Correct.
Okay. When the bond was put together, and we heard some of this before, were mistakes made in the bond? Are there things that we know now that we maybe or maybe didn't know then, but there were some mistakes or some things we discovered afterwards that we wished were there?
I think the word mistake concerns me. I would think we've learned because things shifted, right? In the information that we had at the time versus we were acting in the best interest of what we had at the time. But then as new information was made relevant or changes happened, then yes. But the intent was exactly, we would have written it in a different way if that's what at the time we thought was needed.
So it still remains that the district is trying to do what it believes, and it may be, may not be, is the absolute best for the students.
Correct.
Is that true?
Correct, absolutely.
And across all of Tomball,
all students in the entire
because-
community.
Because that's what you're charged to do.
Correct.
Now,
Whether it's a rezoning, reboundary, a reset, whatever, because there are many different factors, and that's what confuses the matters from time to time. But yes, sir. Nobody is, the board administration is trying to hurt any family, any student. That is not our intent. That's not our charge. That is not our heart.
Now, I think the question before us here tonight is not, we're not deciding here if there should be a school in a certain location or not, or
Correct.
if the bond was right or not. Well, actually, that's not true. The bond is really what we're here for. Did the district act legally, right? That's kind of the question before us. It's not, can they do something different? I'm sorry, it's not, should they do something different, it's can they? And there's, how many attorneys are here? There's one, so Mrs. Sherman, legally the district can do this, right? They can change, as long as it's being for a school, they can do that.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And bond counsel will put you on the spot? We can do that?
Can we get Marcus on this microphone?
Yes, that you can do that.
So legally it can be done.
It can be done. It
Should
has-
be done different, and that's not what's being discussed here tonight. Should is different. Can?
It can. That's why the language is written that way.
Okay. Okay. That's the only questions I have.
Any other questions from board members?
I've got one.
But I guess just on why the
One
bond
second.
language,
Mr.
so I'm so
Lewandowski
sorry.
was
I'm
asking
so sorry,
a
Mark. Sorry.
To the administration, if for some reason the school that was, can you hear me?
A little bit.
Okay. For some reason, if the school that's in question was not built, what would be the result?
Well, then your purpose would be abandoned. I do believe the bond funds have been issued,
So
most of them.
My question is not along those lines. It's along the lines of education of students and
Capacity.
Yeah.
More of a capacity? Is it more of a capacity question? Well, we would be severely overcrowded to the point of unsafety.
What about the quality of education?
Well, there would definitely be quality of instruction challenges because of the number of students you would have to have in overcrowding in the limited spaces that we have. The other challenge we have is the space in which you can put portable buildings and the amount of space we have, which we, of course, started doing that as we had the need. But again, even then, you can only put so many bodies. Remember, the actual campuses are built to capacity. You have the infrastructure built. How big is the library? How big is the cafeteria? How broad are the hallways? Those things as far as just volume of individuals that can be of a number of bathrooms even.
So with the overcrowding, you would have issues with space, teachers overloaded. You'd have students crowded into classrooms. You would have, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, and when you think about education, sometimes it's easy to think about what's happening in the classroom. But a campus is a well-oiled machine. You have a diagnostician, you have a speech-language pathologist, you have interventionists, you have parents we want to come in to assist. Those additional rooms, spaces, you would have people in hallways pulling out maybe onto the auditorium, on the stage, you would just have to fit bodies everywhere you could, inside and outside, which is not conducive to the district that we've created.
Yeah, I do.
It's not a destination excellence environment.
Mark, can I answer that question too? Because
Yes, I was going to ask you.
so during the April special board meeting, the district said that if they built the elementary school, it just wasn't the best way to spread kids out. But if you built the elementary school, you wouldn't have all those issues still. It's just not the most optimal solution to spread children out. It's not, you got up to 90% in some of the Creekside schools for a few years before it went down, and you were underutilized at the elementary school from what I understood. And also during that April special board meeting, the bond language was written this way, was discussed, and it was so that you guys could have, so that the district could have broad use of what they did. And they said that they copied, I think it was Katie's follow through. So it's misleading. It was written misleading so that they could have this ability to do what they want.
I also want to say something about the school capacity because Creekview was over capacity. So they're telling us, well, we're going to remove 5th grade. However, they want to add pre-K. So if you're taking out 5th grade, but you're replacing it with pre-K, you're not really changing anything. The only thing you're changing is the age of the students.
I would just like to add context to our rezoning that's been referenced a couple of times. Board members, you probably remember Creekview was over 100% capacity. I believe they're at 115% capacity. So the shift of students from Creekview was not a solution that was this was a temporary solution to balance, to redistribute students. There was a chart that was shown basically saying the 3 Creekside elementary schools are at capacity. And so right now, we are at 100%, and Timber Creek is at over 100% capacity. And so that was just a distribution of students so that one school wasn't at 115% while the other 2 were at 90 or 87%. And so we are well aware that by shifting the students, we balanced out the crowding so that it wasn't just felt by the Creekview families. And so, Mr. Lewandowski, to answer your question, what's another thing that we may have to do? Ultimately, to provide a optimal, excellent education, we would ultimately have to bus students out of Creekside, not just south of Burroughs Park, to maintain an optimal capacity and utilization for our facilities.
Any other questions from any board members?
Yeah, I'd like to just follow up a little bit on that. In April, the capacity that was put up on some of the content of the meeting for Creekside Forest Elementary was 100% or more?
At Creekside?
Yeah, Creekside Forest.
Creekside Forest, of the 3 has...
So it's going to be the same question for all 3 campuses. In April, when we met, the discussion around capacity for each of those 3 campuses was what percentage? You mentioned it just now. I'm wanting to go specifically. Can you just state that for me?
Yes, so before we did rezoning or reconfiguration there, Creekview was at over 100%. They were at 115%.
Okay.
Creekview, Timber Creek was, I believe, at 92%. I don't have my numbers right in front of me, so I'm just
That's
going
fine.
off of recall.
I'm looking for
And Creekside Forest was, I believe, at 87% capacity. And so within the 3 campuses, there was collective capacity. It just needed a redistribution of students.
to your comment of when you add up the 3 campuses, the average was 100%?
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Any other questions? Okay. It is now appropriate for the board to deliberate. The board is not required to deliberate, but it may. Because this grievance has occurred in open session, any deliberation must also occur in open session. However, any member of the board can request to seek legal advice only from counsel at any time, and for that, there can be a closed session. Is there any member of the board who seeks legal advice at this time?
I would like to seek the advice of counsel.
Okay. In that case, the board will now go into executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code 551071, consultation with board attorney regarding all matters as authorized by law. The time is now 9:22, and no action will be taken while the board is consulting with its attorney. The time is now 9:43. The Tomball Independent School District Board of Trustees is reconvened in open session. No action was taken in closed session. Can I confirm again we are recording? I see that we are. The board now has the opportunity to deliberate if the board so chooses. Is there any deliberation on this grievance? Hearing none, I will turn the meeting back over to the board president.
Parties have completed their presentations. Now the time for the board to make its decision on the issues before it. Is there a motion?
I move that the board uphold the level 2 decision.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Salem, seconded by Mr. McStravick. Any discussion?
I guess I would just add, so, for me, the question was a legal one. Can the district do this or not? Which, I'm not an attorney, I'm not. And regardless of everything else that's said and my own personal feelings and how empathetic I am, it's a legal question, and the best legal advice we have will influence my decision today.
The motion is to uphold the district's level 2 decision. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Mr. and Ms. Cornell, I really appreciate you both. Appreciate the way you've handled this. You've been good patrons of the community in this process, in my opinion. So I appreciate you and all of the conversation that's been part of this night. You'll receive a written notice confirming the action taken by the board tonight. On behalf of the board, I want to thank each of you for being here. This hearing is now concluded.